Good day, fish tankers. Happy 2023 to all of you out there. May your domestic denizens of a deep keep on swimming in your sparkling tanks, and may it be a great year for all of us. Now, I thought today I would speak about something that's a debate that sort of keeps coming up in the fish groups and WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups, and that's this thing about low-tech tanks versus high-tech tanks. Now, we've had these debates coming up, and the one group gets mad at the other group. The guys who do the high-tech tanks say, well, you're not going to be willing to spend money on your tank, you'll keep having an average tank. The other group says not everybody can afford all the high-tech stuff, and they get all aggro about it. And I see to me, there's no real reason for it, you know. Some people like and can afford to drive a Ferrari, and others restore vintage cars and soup them up, and they also become something in their own right. Now, first off, what is a low-tech tank and what is a high-tech tank? Now, as you guys know, if you've watched this channel before, I keep low-tech tanks, and one of my non-fish keeping friends, one evening here while we're having drinks, I'm sitting here in my lounge, actually, that doubles as my office, my desk here behind me with the two tanks on them. And she said, you keep low-tech tanks, but your tanks are full of technology. Look at all the gadgets and stuff. And in a way, for a non-fish keeper, it's true. But my tanks here behind me, it's got the basics that a high-tech tank also will have. It's got a heater thermostat to keep the temperature there, and a thermometer to read the temperature. Then it's got a light, and then it's got a filtration system, whether with power filters or driven by air pumps, just like a high-tech system would have. And it's got a deep dirted substrate. The difference is between a high-tech and a low-tech tank. I think the first difference comes in a high-tech tank. High-tech planter tank almost always has CO2. It's got carbon dioxide injection, so you'll have a CO2 canister that goes into a tank with a diffuser and a bubble counter and a solenoid switch to switch it on and off. And that's the first thing that you have with a high-tech tank. The second thing I would say is the substrate. Whereas a low-tech tank, you'd either have gravel or sand with maybe nothing in it and just epiphyte plants, or you maybe have even artificial plastic or silk plants. You might even just have that, or you may have a sand or gravel substrate with root tabs in it for rooted plants, or like me, you'll have a deep substrate of 3 inches or an inch of soil mixture of some sort, capped off by another 2 inches, 5 centimeters or more of sand or very fine gravel maybe. So that is what a low-tech tank substrate typically consists of. But in a high-tech tank, you've got all these ADA, all these fancy aqua swirls. You know, you'll have something like ADA Amazonia, very expensive aqua swirl, and various bespoke aquascaping type of gravels and sands mixed into it, and it becomes a very expensive thing, but your plants will grow like weeds, because besides the CO2 injection, they also have all those nutrients in that aqua swirl. And then the third component of a high-tech tank, after the carbon dioxide, I call it high-tech swirl or very specialized aqua swirl. The other component that you'll have in a high-tech tank are, of course, the lights. You know, the tanks behind me, I've got cheap Chinese imported lights. You know, the one on my right has just got a white LED light. The one on my left has got two, not quite full spectrum, but they've got white, blue, and red diodes, but it's also a cheapish sort of model. And they've got those sort of lights that also do the trick, but it's not an ADA Aqua Sky or a Chihiros or a Twin Star. Those are your high-tech lights. They've got a lot of features, but more importantly, they are very strong lights. You can really fine-tune those lights to be a bit more on the red side of a spectrum, be a bit more white, cooler, sunsets, and simulate dawn. So that is the high-tech end. Now, in the end of the day, I'm not an expert on high-tech tanks. I've never had them. I've always had these low-tech setups. Through the years, I went from just some gravel on the floor and on the base of a tank with some artificial plants because I had silver dollars. From that, I went to some epiphyte plants like Java fin and just a layer of sand on the bottom, nothing else. And I added some liquid fertilizer, and from that I went to the deep substrates with a swirl layer at the bottom. Tried it with a tank here on my left, which is just over a year and a half old now, and it worked so well I did it with almost all my tanks. It's a 5-gallon tank, it's a bit too small for that. But anyway, that's what I do. Now, there's nothing wrong with a high-tech tank. It's something that I might try in the future. It is just simply very expensive, but your plants will grow much faster. You'll grow a far greater variety of plants. With those high-tech lights, your colors pop a lot more than it does on the lower tech lights. And so all in all, you're going to get a faster growing, more diverse planted tank because of the soil and the light and the CO2 injection. So those Takashi Amano creations, the ADA creations, those high-tech tanks, can you recreate that with a low-tech environment? Not quite. Right? I'm not quite able to do it as well as those tanks. But does that mean that your tank will look average? No, I don't disagree with that. I disagree with that statement as well. You can have a pretty good looking tank just having the basics without having the Chihiros or the Aqua Skylight and the CO2 injection and the ADA Amazonia. You can have a very good tank. So I'm going to show you after I'm done talking just quickly what this tank looks like. It's been growing for 1.5 years. But with a low-tech setup, yes, it's going to be less money. For the cost of my 4 tanks that I have here, I can have a nice single tank, very high tech. I can have that, but I choose to have a bit more variety instead. I might try a high-tech tank later, but with a low-tech tank, you can still achieve quite a lot. And I'm just saying there's no need for this animosity. Some of us, we want to grow a bigger variety of plants. We don't have the same patience, because for the aquarium hobby, patience is definitely a virtue. And if you're going the low-tech route, you're going to need a bit more patience, and you'll have a little bit of limitations as to what you can grow and what you can keep. But that is it, really. That's my opinion on this. I think you can still have a above average tank going the low-tech route, just for cheaper lights, a dirted substrate, or perhaps a substrate with root tabs. The fertilizer is also a big thing in the high-tech tanks. You use a lot more liquid fertilizer besides the substrate as well, because the CO2 in the lights make all the plants grow faster, so they require more fertilizer. So the high-tech tank is also a lot more maintenance, because you have to trim a lot more. Yeah, you need more regular water changes, and you need to use more liquid fertilizer. You've got to keep your finger more on top of it. Whereas my sort of way of doing it here with the deep substrates is much more low maintenance. I'm not a guy that wants to be with my hands in the tank every single week. For me, every 4 weeks, I clean filters, I do a water change, and I trim the plants back. For me, that is about the sweet spot. But anyway, I'm going to just turn the camera around, and I'm going to show you what you can achieve in going this low-tech route. I'm not saying what I do is the best. There are other guys that's much better than me, but just to give you an idea. And then you can go look on YouTube to guys like George Farmer, the ADA style way of doing, and you'll see, you know, it's not the same. We can't quite get it there, but we can still get it pretty damn good. Let's take a closer look. Okay guys, now here is my 29 gallon or 30 gallon. It's just over 100 liters. It's about just under 120 liters. This is an old boiler tank, and this has now been going for, I set it up in May of 2021, so it's been going for 1.5 years and a little bit. Now the thing with these tanks, as you can see the reflection of LED diodes there. It's 2 LED lights. They're not the most expensive lights in the world. They're sort of a no-name LED. I did do a review of them, and you can see the tank is filtered by a sponge filter. I don't really like bubbles bubbling away in the tank. I never did, but because of a load shedding, I had to find a cheap solution, and an AC/DC air pump coupled to one of these does the trick. And then there's also an internal power filter, basically just a little pump that pulls the water through a sponge. So nothing fancy. And that is the tank. Now on the bottom you can see It's deeper than it looks. It's around about 3 inches, you know, give or take. Here and there in the tank it's a little less, here and there in the tank it's a little more. The black that you see is not the sand blackening. The window usually is open here and it gets some morning sun, and then you get the algae growing on the substrate. There you can see the algae grow, not on the substrate, on the glass. And because you never disturb the substrate, yeah, just leave it as it is. I might siphon some mulm off the top of a substrate, but I never gravel vac it. And there is a soil mixture at the bottom. It's a mixture of peat, potting soil and compost. And yes, you have to spend money on a tank, but for $100 I can make enough soil for all 4 of my tanks. And you can go look and compare what ADA Amazonia costs you. It's a lot cheaper. And then with the plants, you're not going to grow red plants here and anything too fancy. I basically try everything out and then I let it go its course. You know, some plants take over, like what we've seen here, Vallisneria. Recently it really took over. I had 1 or 2 bunches at the back and they never really grew. I added another small plant and then they just shot up, and I kind of like the way it looks here over the surface. And in front you see all the crypts, Cryptocorini, Axelrodi, I think there's Vendettae, there's undulata. I'm not sure. I'm not that much into it. I have to know every scientific name. But here you even see a runner came up, and here's a little baby plant coming up. This one here, also a little baby plant. And then the Amazon swords in the middle, and some Anubias. Now, if you look at it, you can see it's not perfect. There's some green spot algae, but the algae is in balance. It doesn't bother me. The algae is nicely in balance. It doesn't take over the tank. And then here, what's developed here over time. Now, it takes a lot of time. That's the thing. You need patience. On this piece of spider wood. On the bottom, there's a piece of wood with Java moss on it. And then we have a layer of Bulbitis. And then we have Soeswassertang. That sort of nice crinkly texture. It's somewhere between plant and algae. It's a kind of a bladderwort that grew up on the spiderwood. I really like this corner of the tank, but it took me a lot of time. The Java moss was not difficult, but that Bulbitis took a long time. It looked like a terrestrial fern. Eventually those leaves fell off and they were replaced by the more submerged growth, the darker leaves that the Bulbitis eventually gets, you know, and then it really started taking off. But I had to wait months for it to get there patiently, and it's not perfect, you know. Some plants grow, some outcompete the others. I do take out the runners of Vallisneria when they come to the front, because if I just leave it, the Vallisneria is going to take over everything. But I like my Cryptocorinus here in front, so I keep them like that. So I do trim back the vallis, make sure it doesn't take over the entire surface of the substrate. And for the rest here and there, I take off a dead leaf. Most of them are root feeders. I add all-in-one type liquid fertilizer once or twice a week, but nothing much. Usually something like Scape Complete. At the moment I can't find that. At the moment I've got the Flourish product from Excel. No, not Flourish Excel, from Seachem, just the Flourish. Excel is an algicide. Don't use that in a tank with Vallisneria. But this gives you an idea. Right, so this is a low-tech tank. It didn't break the bank. Yes, it does cost money. You have to throw some money at it. That high-tech guy is actually right. You have to throw some money at it, but you don't have to throw that much money at it to have a above average tank. You just can't have a Takashi Amano type tank, but I think this is still pretty nice. I like it. Maybe it's not for you, and that is fine. Each his own. We can all have our own ideas of what we want to do and achieve in the hobby and what we like. So that's it, guys. That's what you can do with a low-tech type tank. And yes, you have to spend a bit, and but you don't have to go all the high-tech way. But if you want to do, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing it. You know, people get upset because they always say people are here to make money, they're making money out of us. What's wrong with that? We all have to make money somehow. So if a guy of his shop selling high-tech equipment promotes that, there's nothing wrong with it. It will appeal to many hobbyists that can afford it. And others, there's another route that you can also go. There's always more than one way to have success in this hobby. So that's it from me. As I've said, best of 2023. Please let me know in the comment sections, what do you think? If you think this is above average or not. You might agree or disagree what your experience has been with low-tech as opposed to high-tech tanks. And until we see each other again, happy fish keeping.